Professor Paul C Vitz is making the case that deficient fathers lead males to atheism. In this part, Vitz talks about famous theists and presents his conclusion, and I show why he's a disingenuous hypocrite. Vitz goes on to list a number of famous theists who were contemporaries of the atheists and deists that he cited in the first half of the presentation. Frankly, this list is fairly meaningless. Statistically, I'm certain that for every theist that Vitz cites with a good father, you could cite 100 who had what Vitz describes as defective fathers. In a Western world that has been theistic for most of recorded history, it is statistically unlikely that all famous theists had good fathers. This is another reason why using them as a control group is disingenuous. He concludes this section with the following.
And Mendelssohn was a famous theist at the time. The same thing is true of Martin Buber. He had a strong relationship with his father and also his grandfather, who was often his functional father, and then his father, even though his mother abandoned him at the age of 3. So it's not a Protestant thing, it's not a Catholic thing, it's not a Jewish thing. It seems to be the case, whether your background is in any one of these traditions, that somehow or other a good father strengthens the possibility that you can believe in God.
If this correlation exists, one has to ask whether it is the fact that good fathers provide good role models for the paternal God of all these faiths, or whether it is simply the fact that in massively patriarchal societies, the influence of males in these families, which were already theistic, has a greater role in indoctrinating their sons. Clearly, the people closest to the developing child or youth have the greatest impact in shaping their attitudes. Either way, neither has anything whatsoever to say about the rationality of believing in God, only that people who grow up in stable, patriarchal homes ultimately go on to follow the examples that are set. There's a famous saying, every man grows up to marry his mother. Of course, it's not literally true, but it points out that men's standards of appealing womanhood are determined by their own mothers, even when their mothers were not good women. I would further extend that saying, every man becomes his own father, and every woman becomes her own mother. How often have you heard people joking after saying something boringly responsible? Oh God, I just heard my father speaking.
I think I'd like now to talk a little bit about two important atheists that in certain ways don't fit. To suggest a hypothesis like this, we have to keep in mind that if it works or is more or less true for a significant proportion of people, that's a good psychological hypothesis. But that it's true for all intense atheists, no. People are too complicated, too varied.
It's good that Vitz recognises here that even if his general thesis were true, that it cannot be used as a rule for all atheists. However, he immediately forgets this principle and tries to force the facts to fit his hypothesis as they pertain to Karl Marx.
Karl Marx's father, what about him? His father was a bourgeois, successful businessman. His father was German and Jewish. His father actually came from a long line of famous rabbis, but he converted to Christianity, not for any religious reason, not because he had any intellectual or emotional attraction to Christianity, but because it was socially convenient and useful. So perhaps Marx didn't respect his father for that.
If choosing a religion for the sake of expedience is enough to count as a deficient father, we can expect to see the children of most American politicians becoming prominent atheists over the coming years.
And so the hypothesis doesn't seem to work there. But there's one nagging part of Marx's life that makes me wonder if there might be something there of which we have no record. And that's this. Karl Marx spent his entire life as a thinker and theoretician attacking the bourgeois capitalist class and saying that they were basically the class from hell and that had to be destroyed.
Or maybe it's that teenagers often grow to be rebellious against their parents, and perhaps Marx saw that poverty in Russia oppressed the masses, and he simply did not want to be any part of it. Or maybe, seeing that his father's faith was something that was only as good as the immediate benefit it gained him, Carl never developed that deep deference and indoctrination that those with less theistically mobile fathers might experience.
So maybe there was something going on there, either in the terms of lack of respect or in terms of some trauma or nasty relationship. I don't know. I want to mention what I think is a real exception, though, and that is a famous atheist from the 18th century in France, and that's Denis Diderot. I could find no negative relationship between young Diderot and his father.
By mentioning this person, Vitz attempts to give the impression, to my mind, that he has done an exhaustive study of all noteworthy atheists and found this single anomalous example. The fact that he has already pointed out,
But that it's true for all intense atheists, no. People are too complicated, too varied.
Vitz now goes on to talk about why it is primarily men who become strong atheists.
When men reject God, I would propose they usually substitute another abstract system or another system of belief. It may be a philosophy of materialism or rationalism. It may be communism. It may be science. They will propose another worldview of an intellectual and commonly abstract kind to replace God.
Conflating communism with science is utterly inane and appears to me to be an attempt to poison the world by suggesting that once robbed of their belief, men will simply turn to something, anything, no matter how foolish, to fill the void. To even describe all of these as beliefs is to demean them. Philosophy and science are not beliefs, they are systems for exploration, whilst atheism is a lack of belief entirely. In fact, rejection of God for intellectual reasons does naturally lead atheists into pursuits of science, materialism and philosophy, in pursuit of knowledge about the way that a godless universe actually functions. Men are already naturally predisposed towards mechanical scientific pursuits, as well as towards confrontational arenas such as debate. So it would be no surprise that they gravitate towards atheistic activism.
I think some recent scientists have said that one of the reasons they are very in favor and very strongly support Darwin is it allowed them, as has been said, to be intellectually fulfilled atheists.
There's a massive difference between supporting Darwin, whatever that even means, and believing the science of evolution. The science of evolution explains the variety of life on this planet and eliminates the need for God in that area. In that sense, such knowledge is of course intellectually satisfying because it answers complicated questions into which God was formally inserted as a catch-all answer. To use the term intellectually fulfilled is a subtle way that Vitz uses to demean these scientists, if they exist at all, as simply needing to plug an emotional vacuum.
But in general, women see God as someone with whom, in a sense, they have a personal relationship. And often what happens is when they reject God, they take another personal relationship as a substitute.
Citation needed. Also, every Christian preacher I have ever heard talks about building a relationship with Jesus. Bear in mind here that Vitz is speaking from a Catholic perspective, yet presuming to generalise across all forms of theism. Is a relationship with God even part of a Jewish or Muslim tradition?
Now, one example of this is many feminists aren't atheists exactly because they now believe in a goddess. So they have a relationship with the goddess or with perhaps with sisterhood and all the other feminists and so forth. But you'll notice that that's an interpersonal worldview rather than necessarily an abstract and intellectual one.
So most women who reject God either become feminists or throw their God energies into a new relationship. So what if they're already in a relationship and disagree with feminism? I realise that this lecture was given before third-wave feminism gained the reputation for toxicity that it now has, but this argument seems massively simplistic to me. Again, citation needed. Quoting Simone de Beauvoir.
And in her own biographical material, she describes this change as, I substituted Jean-Paul for God.
Is Simone saying that she substituted the emotional role formerly fulfilled by God, or simply that the time she wasted praying to him and going through all of the rituals now freed her to invest in something else? Given that Jean-Paul Sartre was a deep thinker like herself, it is not any more surprising that she turned to him than that Karl Marx turned to Feuerbach. Vitz begins his conclusion by reiterating that deficient fathers do not always lead to atheism. However, he hammers home his thesis yet again.
One of the common patterns that I've observed are ministers' sons who end up becoming atheists or skeptics. Why? Because many times the minister shows more attention to his congregation, to his parishioners, than he does to his own family. He sort of abandons his family while he serves as a shepherd for other people. Their sons sense this and get angry and rejecting.
Again, correlation does not imply causation. Do ministers' sons reject religion and God because they feel neglected by their fathers and have extrapolated the fatherly God of the Bible or Torah as being like their fathers, or do they simply reject everything that their fathers represent? Perhaps it is also worth questioning whether these people may see beneath the metaphorical veil of religion, witnessing their own fathers' insecurities and insincerities, and see religion for the dog and pony show it really is. Surely the greatest example one can set in terms of religion is not the type of father you are, but the type of theist. Every child quickly learns to hate the hypocritical parenting fallback, do as I say, not as I do.
It's not just theists who can sometimes have psychological reasons for believing in God. Atheists can often have psychological reasons for disbelieving in God.
That may well be true, but if you looked at the number of people who were indoctrinated into religion, or who fell into it because of fear of death, or who turned to it as a comfort in hard times, that set would encompass virtually every theist on the planet. The number who came to it as a rational result of weighing the evidence would be very tiny indeed. On the other hand, the subset of atheists who could be considered hard atheists, much less those among them who became atheists as a result of deficient fathers, is very small indeed. And again, even if 100% of atheists came to it as a result of deficient fathers, that would still not lend weight to the God proposition.
We might let go of the ad hominem arguments. People don't believe in God because, let's say, they believe in pie in the sky, and people don't reject God because he's too much like their father who rejected them. These are relevant, but the real issue has to be to talk not about the ad hominem issues, but to talk about the evidence and the logic and all of the things that the life of the mind, freed from some of our unconscious pressures, might allow us to understand.
Find words from a man who has published 2 books attacking the cause of atheism. Sigmund Freud's Christian Unconscious was published in 1988, and it attempts to show the causes for Sigmund Freud's rejection of God belief. His second book on the subject was Faith in the Fatherless, The Psychology of Atheism. It's no surprise to discover that, like so many Christians, Vitz is an utter hypocrite. It's additionally ironic that his own work focuses on the very subject that he suggests atheists should not, the relationship between psychology and Christianity. Vitz knows that his presentation will be used to make the case that atheists are simply theists with daddy issues. Implicit in that position is the assumption that theism rather than atheism would be mankind's default position if we all just had good fathers who raised us right. He smirkingly shrugs off such an accusation, and one might even believe that this hour-long presentation was just a clever, if overlong, gambit to change the nature of the debate and distract atheists from revealing theists as the indoctrinated and fearful people that most are, were it not for his aforementioned works in which he expounds upon his thesis in much greater detail. This is clearly an idea he believes in. It is a strong belief, to borrow Vitz's terminology. Christianity loses in terms of evidence and logic every single time, and given that fact, one has the right to ask, then why is there still religion, especially when, in the case of the Catholic Church or Islam, it is so massively detrimental to the planet? Much as Vitz may wish to brush off analyses of the causes for theism as mere ad hominems, they are a vital component in understanding the problem of religion and how to solve it. Put bluntly, belief in God is the symptom, but religion is the disease. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please take the time to rate and comment, and it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe. Thank you.